What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to take a deep dive into AMD stock. We're going to talk about the good and the bad and just do some general stock analysis. I also am an AMD shareholder. I started buying it around just a few weeks ago, so I'm a relatively new shareholder. But I'm going to dive into my personal position as well. If you're new here, my name is Sheldon, and I've been investing for over 5 years, and I make completely transparent videos talking about how I invest in the stock market. So if you're somebody that is interested in investing and wants to learn about the stock market and learn how to build and grow your own portfolio, then subscribe to the channel, because that is what we talk about here, and let's all go on this crazy journey of investing together. So let's get right into it, and I want to start by talking about some of the recent news with AMD. So obviously the stock has gone up here in the last week, and it's not just AMD, it's pretty much the broader sector in general. Like, this is, for example, a semiconductor ETF. So AMD has followed the trend. Pretty much the whole sector has followed that trend. Nvidia has been up in the last week as well, and that's mainly due to Microsoft coming out and announcing that it's on track to invest approximately $80 billion to build out AI-enabled data centers in 2025. So that's a crazy investment, and it's not just Microsoft that's also planning a lot of data center investments, which we'll get into a little bit later. And more than half of this total investments will be in the United States. So obviously not all $80 billion is going to go towards AMD, but it just kind of spiked the sector in general, and a lot of investment flooded into the sector because obviously with Microsoft announcing that they're going to be investing $80 billion, that's going to be good for a lot of the stocks that produce chips for AI. So a small portion of that $80 billion investment is probably going to go towards AMD. Obviously, a lot of it's going to go towards Nvidia and infrastructure, but you know, for Microsoft to come out and announce an investment like this, that's huge, and a lot of other big companies are probably going to do the same. If not like announce it, they're going to invest a lot of money into the development of AI and data centers this year. And one other thing this is a Microsoft blog, by the way, which I do recommend you go through and read it because it is pretty interesting. I read most of it. One other thing that is interesting in this blog is that they say the next 4 years can build a foundation for America's economic success for the next quarter century. So basically their thought process with this investment is that it's going to take a couple years to really build out the infrastructure and the data centers required to train a lot of AI. And investments like this is going to be the foundation for innovation for the next quarter century, is essentially Microsoft's stance here. So that's kind of the reason that, a lot of these stocks have gone up in the last week or so. It's a relatively new article. If we look at Nvidia on a 5-day chart, it did spike, and then, there's been a recent pullback, but that's interesting. It pulled back a lot more than AMD today. Considering the performance of Nvidia at CES was really good, which we'll get into, but one other thing that I want to touch on for AMD, if you didn't see, CES is happening right now, which is basically one of the biggest technology events of the year, and it's in Las Vegas, I believe. And AMD came out and announced some things, but it didn't seem like the community was too happy with what AMD came out and talked about, at least in their keynote. Like, you can see by a couple of these comments here, like, I waited 45 minutes listening to AI crap without getting GPUs. So they didn't come out and announce GPUs out of the gate like a lot of people were expecting and a lot of people in the community were expecting. So that was kind of interesting to see. I'm like a layer back from that hardcore community with AMD. I wasn't sitting there waiting for them to announce GPUs, but I'm more interested from that investment standpoint of how the community reacts to these sorts of things and what the news is coming out of these events. But they did release GPUs. Like, it wasn't just like they released a lot. They released, I believe, some new CPUs. They released some, what was it here? Includes the Ryzen 9, which was a laptop lineup. Yeah, mid-range laptops and ultra portables. So it's like handheld devices. I believe they released a chip for the Steam Deck and just some handheld gaming devices, like mobile gaming devices, AI PC chips, and handheld processors, graphics cards. So they did release graphics cards here. I don't know why it wasn't a major thing in their keynote speech, because I mean, if you know, let me know in the comments below why they didn't announce it, because it seemed like that's what the community was waiting for, and then they also did announce it, but it wasn't announced at the keynote. So I don't know what was going on there. And then, like, you compare that with NVIDIA's keynote, which I watched a majority of both of them, and NVIDIA's keynote was really, really good. Jensen Huang is an absolute legend. I mean, just look at that jacket. That thing is, that's a crazy jacket. He's always wearing a black leather jacket, but this one was just a little bit extra special, I guess, for CES. But they came out and introduced new GPUs out of the gate. It was the first thing in their keynote that they announced, I'm pretty sure. And then they also talked about a Cosmos platform for developing physical AI systems like robots and self-driving vehicles. So and I think they made it like, I don't know if it's open source, but it's available on GitHub for developers to use. So they came out and announced hardware, software. They had a really cool keynote speech, and just like the whole presentation in general was very entertaining, and there's lots of good information in that. So if you're a tech nerd, or if you're an investing nerd, or if you're both like me, then I highly recommend you checking that out, because it was pretty cool. And obviously this video is not about NVIDIA, but you can't really talk about AMD without talking about NVIDIA, because NVIDIA is clearly the winner in the sector, which we'll talk about a little bit more here. But so that's some recent news for AMD. And to take a step back here, so that's just kind of been what's been going on. But to take a step back, I want to talk about the whole sector in general of GPUs and AI processors, and basically the semiconductor sector in the market. And I think we can all agree that going into 2025, pretty much the biggest trend is AI, right? And AI means data centers, and data centers means more investment from a lot of companies. So you're seeing companies like Microsoft come out. You're seeing Kevin O'Leary, if I got the article here. Kevin O'Leary, I cannot say his last name. Kevin O'Leary leads a visionary $70 billion AI data center project in Alberta. So, a lot of these big names are coming out to support these data center projects. You had Meta talking about nuclear power to support their data center initiatives, which, everybody's talking data center right now, basically. And that is a massive trend going into 2025, which really fuels the sector that AMD, Broadcom, Intel, NVIDIA, obviously, that they all play in, which is why, a lot of their stock prices have done pretty well recently, especially NVIDIA. So let's dive a little bit deeper into AMD as a company to give you a good idea of what they do, what kind of products they sell. So this is their website here, and they have a lot of products and a lot of different solutions. They have server chips, they sell personal laptops, business systems, personal desktops, and they have a lot of different chips. So like if you're an investor, it's a good idea to try and understand a lot of them. I completely understand how a lot of people aren't going to dive farther into the company and try to understand all their different chips, because they have a lot of different chips, and differentiating them is very difficult, and their naming scheme for a lot of their chips is super confusing. But just know that, I think it's a good idea to know what segments relate to what chips. And so there's 4 main key segments that AMD has, which I guess I can pull that up first just to give an idea. So they have their data center segments, they have their client segments, gaming, and embedded. And the main bet that you're making with AMD is their data center segment, right? Like what I was talking about with all of that data center and AI investment, that's all going to go to this data center segment here. And so this is their EPYC chip and their Instinct chip mainly. I think it is actually only specifically those two. So the servers, and then they also have an accelerator chip for GPUs called their Instinct accelerators. And this is the big bet. I believe in one of their reports, I think I can find it, but they didn't announce any new Instinct chips lately, but this year and then going into 2026, I think they're expected to release new Instinct chips. But these are definitely the best of the best, right? Like they're just as good as pretty much any other competitor you're going to find. All the leading semiconductor companies that are releasing AI processors and things that you train models on, they're going to be top of the line, right? So that's why a lot of these companies diversify, like a lot of the cloud platforms like Azure, AWS, Google. Like you can run instances of all the main processors from a lot of the leading manufacturing companies. So the Instinct and the EPYC chips are the ones that you're mainly going to be banking on. You know, also for their gaming segments, and AMD is known as well in the community for their GPUs, hence the little bit of an uproar for not announcing new GPUs. But they did still announce GPUs at the same time. So I believe it is the Radeon graphics. This is their processor for desktop. I'm not sure if this is their gaming one. But if we look at their client segment is their Ryzen and their Threadripper chips, which I think are just CPU chips, which is like for your desktop PCs. Yeah, so for your AI PCs for enterprises, so that's their client segment. Their gaming segment is made up, so they actually supply chips for for Sony, for PS5s, which is a really good contract that they have in their gaming segment. And they also have, obviously, graphics processing units, GPUs, that a lot of people put in their PCs. It's a good, normal competitor to NVIDIA, and that's going to be their Radeon series. And then in their embedded segment, it's going to be a lot of their, Versal Alveo. I have no idea. I don't really know about these chips, to be honest. This is a slightly smaller segment. I guess it's bigger than gaming, which is surprising, right? Like from a surface level, you'd expect their gaming segment to be bigger than their embedded one. But this is just kind of like breaking down the company, trying to understand it, just so you know what you're investing in. But from an investment standpoint, the main thing that you are buying here is their EPYC chip and their Instinct chip, I think. Like for the next 4 or 5 years, if you're expecting a lot of investment to flow into data centers and AI, then through AMD, those two chips are going to be what is supporting the revenue coming from that investment, right? Like the return on that investment is going to be through these chips. So let's dive into some of the financials for AMD. They had $24 billion of trailing 12-month revenue. And I believe if we look at their financials on an annual basis, they did have a slight decline in 2023 of 3.9%, but they're already in their trailing 12-month revenue. They're already on track to have a record year. And I believe if on a quarterly basis, they just announced a record quarter. So 6.8, I believe, is at least in recent years. Got close in Q2 of 2022, but it was a record quarter. And I think they are on track to have report another record quarter coming up. They report earnings on January 28th, and that's actually going to be their year end. So we're going to get an annual report from AMD at the end of this month. And so we're kind of approaching earnings seasons here a little bit. Like at the end of this month is when a lot of the big companies start to report earnings, including AMD, which will be definitely interesting because I think they guided. What did they guide for? For fourth quarter 2024, AMD expects revenue to be approximately $7.5 billion. So they're expecting to be over $7 billion, 7.5, plus or minus 3 million. So even if they come in and meet expectations or beat, that's probably going to be pretty good considering the sentiment is of the sector anyway, is expecting a lot of investment. So if they come in and continue to meet or beat expectations, I'm happy as a shareholder. So one thing that I really want to touch on, and I think is important to understand if you're interested in buying AMD as a stock, is their gross margin, because it's a little bit disappointing, if I'm being honest. If we go financials here, statistics, and go all the way down. So they're currently working with, so they're expecting a 54, so that would be an increase in gross margin. So they currently have like a 52% gross margin, and then that trickles down to a 7.5% profit margin. And I'm about to blow your mind right now, because if we look at NVIDIA, this is crazy. This just goes to show why NVIDIA is such a beast, because if we look at their gross margin, 75% gross margin on a $3.5 trillion company. That might be better than Meta even, which is insane. Don't quote me on that, but just their margins at NVIDIA is such a crazy. They're crazy numbers because it's such a big company, and it's also a hardware company. Like, it's not just a software company, right? Like, if you're developing and shipping software, it's easy to have high margins because you just build the software once, then you copy and paste it. There's a whole manufacturing process here, and there's cost of goods and logistics and supply chain. So it's just, in order to have a 55% profit margin, that's crazy. So that's the gold standard, right, in the sector. That's NVIDIA. If we can get AMD to even slightly start to approach some of those numbers, like, their gross margin isn't bad. 50% gross margin is still pretty good. Like, that's actually really good. But if they can slightly, like, in between gross margin and profit margin, if they can make some of those line items a little bit more efficient, that's going to be really good and reflect well in the stock price. If they can start to raise this profit margin up just a little bit and try to inch a little bit closer to NVIDIA's profit margin. And so let's look at some of the line items on their financials between those two, because I think it's kind of interesting. So if we go, where's their gross profits? And one thing that I find very interesting is that, so if we look at their trailing 12-month selling and general administrative expenses, so this is like, I guess I can get a list. I think there's a list here of what this is. So your selling and general administrative expenses is like salaries, advertising, marketing, insurance, office supplies, maintenance and repairs, rent, all of that stuff gets wrapped up into your selling and general administrative expenses. Somehow, AMD has roughly $2.6 billion. And then if we go look at NVIDIA, and maybe this should be a video talking about NVIDIA stock because it's unreal. They're selling in general it's 3.2. And NVIDIA has 113 billion in revenue. AMD only has like 24 billion in revenue. So AMD needs to work on getting more efficient as a company, right? Makes sense. And if they're able to do that, which, I believe in Lisa Su, she's a beast, and she's the CEO, obviously, of AMD. And so if they're able to squeeze a bit more margin out of their business and make themselves a little bit more efficient as a company, then that's going to be good for the stock price. And I think they're going to end 2025 higher than they are now, potentially even much higher, especially if they come in with a couple good quarters. And they're going to have their yearly earnings report, so that'll definitely be interesting to read through as well. But this is pretty interesting, right? And they're also, like, one thing is not, I don't take analyst estimates for gospel, and neither should you, because, let's be honest, it's just some other random person that gets just doing their random analysis, right? But they are expected, I think it's not a bad idea to look at it anyway. And if we're looking at AMD EPS, their earnings per share, they're expected to have a crazy growth number in EPS. So if they can come in and have some good earnings per share growth numbers, that's obviously going to take their PE ratio down, make their valuation more attractive, and it's going to be better for the stock price having a higher earnings per share. Obviously, that just looks better from a vanity metric standpoint, and not even just a vanity metric standpoint, like, it is better. So, all of these metrics I'm going to be keeping an eye on. For me right now, it is an attractive investment. So if AMD is able to squeeze out a bit more margin, bring that valuation down, then I'm definitely going to be more interested in even adding more shares to my position, which I guess we can touch on. I haven't even looked at my position yet. Kind of a tough day out there. It's bloody. It's a battle. It's a battle out there today because I'm down about 1.3K in the portfolio. which is, and you know, I normally don't. So a lot of the times when I make videos, I swear to God, I don't plan this, but my portfolio seems to be up. Here's a down day. This is not a good day. You know, 1.3K down, we're down 1.67%. You know, that's just the way she goes. That's the portfolio goes up, the portfolio goes down. AMD, they're not really moving at all today. They're down 0.21%. I currently have 18 shares at $127. And currently they're sitting at 129. So right now I'm up on the position, a big $31. That's huge. So my plan with AMD anyway, like my plan with the position is obviously to watch for their next earnings report. It's going to be very interesting to see what kind of numbers they come in, if they beat that $7.5 billion in revenue, where their gross margins and profit margins come in, and where their EPS and what their EPS growth numbers are. So those are going to all be things that I am keeping an eye on. You know, I think they are a little bit of the underdog in the industry, and given enough time, you know, I'm not saying the stock price is going to 4x this year. I think it could do good this year, especially if they come in with good numbers on their earnings, but you know, it's a long-term investment for me. I invest only in a 3 to 5 plus year time horizon with a lot of these stocks. I do plan on holding AMD for the long term. So these are some reasons that I'm interested in holding AMD in my portfolio. Please let me know if you have done any other research, and if there's any statistics or interesting facts about the stock that you know that I didn't mention, because this is just some of the research that I've done, but I know that it is a popular stock and a lot of people out there are paying attention to AMD. Let me know if you'd rather just hold NVIDIA as well. Like, it was a little bit of a toss-up for me, but NVIDIA's just shot up so much in the last year that it wasn't necessarily an attractive investment for me from that type of perspective. I do like playing the underdog, and I do like that AMD has been struggling a little bit, and their stock price has gone down, and it was way off their highs. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate everybody that watches these videos. If you're interested in learning how to invest and growing your own portfolio, subscribe to the channel and join the community of like-minded people. This is what we talk about here. I'm here just as much as you guys to get better and learn. So let's all do it together. It's more fun when we all join the conversation, and I think we can all learn off each other. So subscribe to the channel, drop a like if you enjoyed the video. I wish you all the best of luck on your investment journey. Peace.